Remember that one time that one guy was like, the tap water's turning the frogs gay? That was funny. Yeah, and then it wasn't turning them gay, it was just causing the male frogs to grow female reproductive organs. That was pretty classic. Wait, what? Oh, come on, you've heard this one before. Herbicide gets into water via farming runoff, likely, according to research, has adverse effects on hormones in vertebrates. What are you gonna do? I don't know about this one. And then the owners of the herbicide lobbied the EPA so nobody else could do research on the harmful effects of the herbicide besides them. This isn't as funny as the frogs turning gay. Yeah, you know, saying the government organizations that are supposed to protect us and the corporations that are supposed to benefit us actually put profit motive over ecological harm every time. It's not as catchy. If only the frogs were just turning gay, am I right? I don't like it here. Join the club.
People ask me all the time, hey Brian, do you really use that keto elevate stuff and does it really work? The answer is yes and yes. Never in my entire life have I lost body fat so quickly. Not even in my prime at 25, which is over 25 years ago. I'm approaching 54 this year. If you want to support the channel and do your health a favor, grab some with my link in the description. This just came out last week, or this week, and I meant to report on this, but this is crazy. The CDC reportedly monitored the location data of millions of phones, and we knew that they would. But you're a conspiracy theorist if you say that. This was actually an article written by Vice's Motherboard. I'm going to go ahead and read it from there because they, according to social media platforms like YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, consider Vice a top shelf authoritative source. So let's see what the top shelf authoritative source for the CIA and the military industrial complex has to say. It's amazing that they even let this kind of stuff out. This should disturb everybody. This should sober us up. This should get us off of each other's throats and directed toward our real enemies in the Zyro International Banking Cartel and the domestic terror cell known as the I.R.S. CDC tracked millions of phones, says Motherboard. Millions of phones to see if Americans followed you-know-what lockdown orders. If that doesn't grip you and sober you up like the smelling salt of reality, I don't know what will. Newly released documents show the CDC planned to use phone location data to monitor schools and churches and wanted to use data for many non-you-know-what purposes too. There's this large sum of money. I think I saw $420,000 at the very least. Yeah, here it is, $420,000. We'll get down to it. I haven't read this specific article right here. I read this one, but I want to go with Motherboard on this. I want to go with Vice. I think Vice is owned by CNBC Universal too. That's nonstop bull crap from NBC. Could be wrong in that, but I think that Vice was bought out by NBC Universal for I think it was $200 million. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention bought access to location data harvested from tens of millions of phones in the United States to perform. Why are you guys doing this? Why do you need this, CDC? Oh, to perform analysis. It's called surveillance. It's called the police state, the surveillance state. And the CDC is that governing body who's watching what you're doing, where you're going, how long you're there, what friends you're with, and other data. What does it say right here? For many non you know what related purposes too. Wow. Bought access to location data harvested from tens of millions of phones. To perform analysis of compliance with curfews. Make sure you're in when we say you should be. If you're not, you're in violation of the law, boy. And the long arm of the law, that CDC, gonna get you. Track patterns of people visiting K through 12 schools and specifically monitor effectiveness of policy in the Navajo Nation, according to CDC documents obtained by Motherboard. The documents also show that although the CDC used you-know-what as a reason to buy access to the data more quickly, it intended to use it for more general CDC purposes. So when they went there to get this authorization, well, the reason we're doing it is because we got to keep people safe. You want people safe, don't you? Oh, yeah, I want people safe. Okay, well, that's why we're doing this, because we're going to actually perform analysis of compliance so we can make sure we can flatten the curve. You want to flatten the curve, don't you? Oh, absolutely. Because if you say you don't want to flatten the curve, if you say you don't want to participate with this in this program, then you hate humanity. And they will declare you evil. They will say that you hate humanity. Brian doesn't want to flatten the curve. Brian doesn't want to keep people safe. Brian doesn't want to eradicate the planned organized partial shutdown of the U.S. economy in the second, third, and fourth quarters, according to James Bullard from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. Location data is information on a device's location stored from the phone, which can then show where a person lives, where he or she works, and where they went. Are you in compliance? Oh, where do you work again? Were you late when you tried to clock in today? By the way, when you did clock in, did you wear a ritualistic shame muzzle? You know we're tracking your heart through your Fitbit, right? The sort of data the CDC bought was aggregated, meaning it was designed to follow trends that emerged from, so they're looking at every pattern that just helping the AI know a little bit more about you and me, that emerged from the movements of groups of people, but individuals too. But researchers have repeatedly raised concerns with how location data can be de-anonymized, taken away your anonymity, and used to track specific people. Are they tracking you? Bet they are. The documents revealed that the expansive plan the CDC had last year to use location data from highly controversial data broker SafeGraph, the company the CDC paid $420,000 of your tax cattle dollars. My tax cattle dollars. Let's see. Let's spend the money that John Doe gave us so that we can access John Doe's data and find out where he's been, who he's with, if he's obeying the guidelines. Are you back home at 10:30 p.m. and obeying the curfew like we told you, Mr. Doe? For access to 1 year of data includes Peter Thiel and the former head of Saudi intelligence among its investors. Google banned the company from the Play Store in June. Says the CDC used the data for monitoring curfews, with the document saying that SafeGraph's data, quote, has been critical for ongoing response efforts, such as hourly monitoring of activity in curfew zones or detailed counts of visits to participating pharmacies for VAXX monitoring. Zach Edwards, a cybersecurity researcher who closely follows the data marketplace, told Motherboard in an online chat after reviewing the documents, quote, the CDC seems to have purposefully created an open-ended list of use cases which included monitoring curfews, neighbor-to-neighbor visits, visits to churches, schools, and pharmacies, and also a variety of analysis with this data specifically focused on violence. And that would be their interpretation of violence. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that you had anything to do with violence, but if they interpret it to be so, and it's the CDC, everybody believes the CDC, man, then it's violence. Motherboard obtained the documents through the Freedom of Information Act FOIA request with the CDC, which is interesting. Good job, Motherboard. That's called journalism. I endorse that. I don't care where it comes from. If it's going to expose the corrupt cartel going on behind the scenes in the U.S. government, more power to you. I don't care who does it. I don't care where it comes from. CNN used to do a really good job up till about 2009, 2010. Not completely good job, because we know what happened in 2001, but I'm just saying in 2009, they literally exposed Pfizer as a criminal organization, a habitual criminal offender engaged in corrupt marketing practices, bribing physicians, and suppressing adverse trial results. CNN was exposing that back in 2009. Does that mean they didn't have their faults back then too? No, but at least that right there is honest journalism. Calling out the big farm guy, telling the public what harm they have caused a public that they were supposed to keep safe, and then saying, hey, somebody needs to throw the book at them. But the federal government wouldn't do it because they were so entrenched in the Medicare system. It's like, well, if we get rid of Pfizer, then all these people who are on their drugs, they could die. So we can't do anything to them. And then CNN said, hey, just like the big banks under the TARP bailout in 2008 were too big to fail, we think it looks like the big pharma industrial complex under Pfizer has set itself up as too big to nail. We can't even nail them, because now the United States government is saying, well, if we pull the root
out of the ground, then the vegetables will suffer. The document contained a long list of what the CDC describes as 21 different potential CDC use cases. They include track patterns of those visiting K through 12 schools by the school and compared to 2009, compare with epimetrics, examination of the correlation of mobility patterns, data, and rising cases that we can't talk about here on this channel, movement restrictions, border closures, inter-regional and night curfews to show compliance, examination of the effectiveness of public safety and public policy on the Navajo Nation. At the start of the cell phone location data was seen as a potential useful tool. I wonder if that was planned. Hey, let's bring something up on the horizon where, everybody's pretty much got cell phones right now. Why don't we use that as kind of a tracking system and have them have to check in and create these COVID passes where it's got a green check mark if you want to go into that bar, if you want to go into that restaurant, if you want to go into that dining room of that restaurant you want to go to. We got some serious stuff. We got some serious tyranny we can blanket across the land. This looks like a good idea. Plus, we're going to make a whole ton of money and transfer a whole bunch of power. Win-win-win situation for us. The big club members, but you ain't in it. Multiple media organizations, including New York Times, use location data provided by companies in the industry to show where people were traveling to once lockdowns started to lift, or highlight that poorer communities were unable to shelter in place as much as richer ones. And the planned organized partial shutdown as a whole has been a flashpoint in a border culture war with conservatives and anti-VAXX groups protesting government mask mandates and VAXX mandates. So they're tracking you. That's the CDC. They are tracking you according to NBC Universal under Vice, and Motherboard reported on that. Good job. But we don't know a fraction of what they're doing, guys. These are visual and listening devices. They can hear you. If you have it on, I don't care what app you have on it. I don't care what you think you can plug into it or whatever. There's some workaround where they can read your retina. There's biometrics involved in this. They can study your voice. They can, through the accelerometer in there, they can figure out how you walk and what your gait is. And then they got patents. They can patent the information that they extract from you. And they do it all with these little handy dandy miracle devices that every single one of us seems to have. If you don't have one, I'd like to hear it. Is there anybody in here right now? We're on this live stream. Does anybody in here not have a smartphone? Maybe you have one of those old, I still got my 2003 Nokia, man. I still got my Razr from 2009. Do you guys still have your Motorola Razr, or does everybody in here? I got a smartphone. I've had a smartphone for a long time. The articles like this make you think, maybe I don't need that, baby. Maybe I don't need that, but it's really nice to have a high resolution camera when you're messed with by a state functionary. But they can bite you. Come back to bite you, boy. Come back to bite you.
It might be a good idea while you still can to convert your fiat currency notes into long-term storable food. Use my link in the description and get $100 off instantly for this survival food. Do it while you still can, because guys, I cannot guarantee that they're going to have this available in the future.